4:30 a.m. the 13th of April 1940, the fjord is black glass, cold air cuts the lungs. Snow clings to the mountains that rise straight out of the sea. Somewhere in the darkness, engines throb low and steady. Then, without warning, a flash splits the horizon. A gun roars. The sound rolls between the cliffs like thunder trapped in stone. Another flash answers it. Steel screams. Shells ricochet off water and ice. Men dive for cover on icy decks as tracer fire slices through the Arctic dawn. In the narrow waters of Narvik Fjord, destroyers are fighting at point-blank range, their guns blazing in a half-light. Within days, half of Germany's modern destroyer fleet will be gone, and it will happen here. High above the waterline, the snow-covered peaks of northern Norway watch in silence. Narvik is not a large city, but in 1940 it holds enormous strategic weight. Every winter, iron ore from the mines of Kiruna in Sweden is shipped through this ice-free port. For Germany, dependent on that ore to feed its war industry, Narvik is essential. When the Second World War begins in September 1939, both Britain and Germany understand the importance of Scandinavian neutrality. Control of Norwegian waters means control of vital shipping lanes in the North Atlantic. It means influence over the flow of iron ore. It means naval bases dangerously close to Britain's coastline die in early April 1940. Adolf Hitler authorizes Operation Weserübung, the invasion of Denmark and Norway. The goal is swift occupation before the Allies can intervene. German naval forces are divided into task groups assigned to seize key Norwegian ports. Narvik is assigned to a powerful flotilla of 10 German destroyers under Commodore Friedrich Bonte. These ships, modern and heavily armed, carry nearly 2,000 mountain troops tasked with capturing the town and securing the railway to Sweden. The journey north is perilous. On the 9th of April, 1940, the German destroyers force their way into Narvik Fjord under cover of snow squalls. They surprise Norwegian coastal defences and quickly land troops. Narvik falls the same day. But the German success comes at a cost. The voyage has consumed fuel at an alarming rate. Refueling at sea in Arctic conditions proves difficult. Tankers assigned to support the destroyers struggle to reach them. By the time Narvik is secured, the German ships are low on fuel, scattered within the fjord system, and vulnerable. Meanwhile, the Royal Navy reacts. ATC, British intelligence has already detected German naval movements. The Admiralty dispatches forces northward. Among them are 5 destroyers of the 2nd Destroyer Flotilla under Captain Bernard Warburton Lee. Their mission is aggressive and clear. Enter Narvik. Engage the enemy. Before dawn on the 10th of April, 1940, the British destroyers slip into the fjord through heavy snow. Visibility is limited. The mountains trap sound and distort distance. The water is calm but unforgiving, bordered by steep cliffs that leave little room to maneuver. At approximately 4:30 a.m., the British open fire on German ships anchored in the harbour. The attack achieves surprise. Several German destroyers are hit quickly. Commodore Bonte is killed when his flagship, Wilhelm Heidkamp, is struck and its forward magazine explodes. The blast tears through the ship with catastrophic force. For a moment, confusion reigns. German crews scramble to raise steam and return fire. Some ships are caught with boilers cooling. Others manage to maneuver into firing positions deeper within the fjord. The confined waters turn the engagement into a close-range duel. Torpedoes streak through the narrow channels. Shells echo off rock faces. 2 German destroyers are sunk in this first battle. But the British pay heavily. As they attempt to withdraw, German ships counterattack from inner positions. In the chaotic fighting, Captain Warburton Lee is mortally wounded. By the end of the action, 2 British destroyers have been sunk and 3 damaged. The first naval battle of Narvik ends without decisive control, yet the strategic picture is clear. The German destroyers remain trapped in the fjord, low on fuel and ammunition. The Royal Navy is not finished. Over the next days, British forces gather strength. Reinforcements are assembled, including the battleship HMS Warspite, veteran of the First World War and one of the most powerful ships in the Royal Navy. Her 15-inch guns can obliterate destroyers with a single hit. On the 13th of April, 1940, the British return. This time, the approach is deliberate. Warspite leads 9 destroyers into the fjord. The weather is clearer, though snow still streaks the mountainsides. A reconnaissance aircraft launched from Warspite spots a German submarine lurking nearby. British destroyers attack and sink it, eliminating one threat before the surface engagement even begins. The geography of Narvik Fjord now becomes decisive. Long, narrow, and branching into smaller inlets, it restricts speed and maneuverability. German destroyers, short on fuel, cannot escape to open sea. They are forced to fight where they stand. Warspite's guns open fire. The thunder of 15-inch shells shakes the fjord. Columns of water rise beside German ships as near misses send shockwaves through hulls. Destroyers, built for speed and agility rather than armor, cannot withstand such punishment. One by one, German vessels are hit, set ablaze, or driven aground by their crews to avoid sinking in deep water. British destroyers pressing closer, engaging at shorter range. Torpedoes are fired. Machine guns chatter across icy decks. Smoke drifts between cliffs, clinging to rock and snow. By the end of the Second Naval Battle of Narvik, 8 of the original 10 German destroyers sent to seize the port are destroyed. Some are sunk outright. Others are scuttled by their crews after running out of ammunition and fuel. Only a handful of survivors escape into the mountains alongside German land forces. It is a devastating loss. At that moment in April 1940, Germany's destroyer fleet consists of only a few dozen modern ships. Losing 10 in a single operation represents a severe blow to the Kriegsmarine's surface strength. Nearly half of its operational destroyers are gone. For Britain, the victory restores confidence after earlier naval setbacks. It demonstrates that even in distant Arctic waters, the Royal Navy can strike hard and decisively. Yet the story does not end with burning ships and drifting wreckage. On land,
Listen
German
closely.
mountain
The enemy
troops
is near.
still
We must
hold
move with
Narvik
caution
against
tonight.
Allied forces.
Follow every command precisely. No mistakes.
Snowstorms sweep across the region. Supply lines stretch thin. The campaign in Norway will continue for weeks, shaped by events far beyond the fjord. Because while British guns have shattered Germany's destroyer force here, a larger storm is gathering over Western Europe, and what happens next will change the entire course of the Norwegian campaign. Snow still clings to the shattered hulls. The smoke from burning destroyers drifts slowly across Narvik Fjord, caught between dark water and white mountains. Twisted metal juts above the surface. Oil spreads in thin, rainbow streaks across the freezing sea. Survivors cling to wreckage or struggle ashore along icy rocks, their hands raw from cold and shock. The naval battle is over. But the campaign is not. By the 13th of April 1940, 8 German destroyers have been destroyed in and around Narvik. Ships such as Wilhelm Heidkamp, Dieter von Roeder, and Erich Kolner are sunk or scuttled after exhausting ammunition. Others, including Georg Thiel and Bernd von Arnim, are run aground deliberately by their crews once fuel and shells are gone. The once proud flotilla that had carried German mountain troops into Norway only days earlier now lies wrecked in narrow Arctic waters. For the Kriegsmarine, the loss is staggering. At the start of the Norwegian campaign, Germany possessed only a limited number of modern-type 1934 and 1936 destroyers. These ships were fast and heavily armed, but they suffered from design flaws, including high fuel consumption and mechanical fragility in heavy seas. Narvik exposes those weaknesses brutally. Long-range deployment, limited tanker support, and confinement inside a fjord proved fatal. Admiral Erich Raeder, Commander-in-Chief of the German Navy, had taken a major gamble supporting Operation Weserübung. The German surface fleet was far smaller than Britain's. Yet to secure Norway, Raeder had committed a significant portion of his destroyer strength. Now nearly half of it is gone in less than a week. Meanwhile, on the Allied side, HMS Warspite becomes the symbol of British resolve. During the second battle, her aircraft, a ferry swordfish floatplane, launches from the battleship and locates the German submarine U-64 inside Herjangstad. British destroyers attack and sink it. It becomes the first U-boat destroyed by an aircraft launched from a battleship in wartime. A small detail, but symbolic of innovation and reach. Warspite's heavy guns dominate the narrow waters. Each 15-inch shell weighs nearly a ton. Against lightly armored destroyers, such firepower is overwhelming. Even near misses can cripple propulsion systems or rupture hull plates through sheer concussive force. British destroyers, working in coordination, finish what the battleship begins, yet for the German troops already ashore under General Eduard Dietl, the naval catastrophe changes everything. Dietl commands the 3rd Mountain Division, elite Gebirgsjäger trained for alpine warfare. Once the destroyers are gone, these troops are effectively cut off. Resupply by sea becomes impossible. Ammunition and heavy equipment are limited to what was landed during the initial invasion. Food grows scarce. Snow and freezing temperatures complicate movement inland. Still, they hold Narvik. British and French forces, along with Polish and Norwegian units, begin landing in northern Norway to counter the German occupation. Over the following weeks, bitter fighting unfolds across snow-covered ridges and frozen valleys. The naval victory at Narvik gives the Allies control of the surrounding waters, allowing reinforcements to arrive. In late May 1940, Allied troops managed to recapture Narvik from German forces. It becomes the first significant tactical victory against German ground troops during the war. Photographs from the period show Allied soldiers standing among shattered buildings, snow still packed along the streets. But history rarely moves in straight lines. While fighting continues in Norway, events to the south change everything. On the 10th of May, 1940, Germany launches its massive offensive into the Low Countries and France. The Blitzkrieg surges through Belgium and the Ardennes, outflanking Allied armies. Within weeks, British forces are retreating toward Dunkirk. Suddenly, Narvik becomes secondary. Despite their success in northern Norway, the Allies face a far greater crisis in Western Europe. Evacuation plans are drawn up. One by one, Allied units are withdrawn from Norway to defend Britain and regroup after the collapse of France. By early June 1940, German forces reoccupy Narvik without major resistance. Strategically, the campaign ends in German control of Norway, but the destruction of the destroyer fleet at Narvik leaves a permanent scar on the Kriegsmarine. Without those ships, Germany's ability to challenge British naval operations in the North Sea and Atlantic is reduced. Destroyers are critical not only for fleet engagements but also for escorting larger vessels and protecting supply routes. Their loss limits flexibility. It forces Germany to rely more heavily on submarines in the Atlantic campaign. The Arctic setting of Narvik magnifies every decision made during those April days. The fjords are beautiful but unforgiving. Narrow channels restrict maneuver. High cliffs limit visibility. Weather shifts rapidly, bringing snow squalls that conceal movements one moment and expose them the next. For sailors on both sides, the environment is as dangerous as the enemy. British accounts describe shells echoing off rock walls, making it difficult to judge direction. German survivors recall the shock of Warspite's heavy guns, the sound reverberating through steel hulls and across water like continuous thunder. And there is something else. Narvik proves that even bold, well-planned surprise operations can collapse if logistics fail. The German invasion force achieved its initial objective with speed and audacity. But fuel shortages and limited resupply sealed the fate of the destroyers. Once trapped inside the fjord, they became targets. It is a harsh lesson in naval warfare. Control of sea lanes is not just about winning battles. It is about sustaining ships once they arrive. Tankers, supply vessels, coordination across hundreds of miles of hostile water. At Narvik, Germany's reach exceeded its grasp. Back in Berlin, the loss of so many destroyers is quietly acknowledged but publicly downplayed. Propaganda emphasizes the continued occupation of Norway. Yet naval planners understand the cost. Replacing those ships will take time and resources Germany can scarcely afford. In Britain, the engagement boosts morale. After months of uncertainty at sea, Narvik stands as proof that the Royal Navy still dominates surface warfare. Newspapers highlight the role of Warspite. Sailors who fought in the fjord carry stories of icy decks and close-range gunfire back to ports across the United Kingdom. But beneath the celebration lies a sobering reality. The broader war is escalating. Germany now controls Denmark and, soon, all of Norway. Submarine bases along the Norwegian coast will threaten Allied shipping deep into the Atlantic. Airfields carved from frozen ground will extend the Luftwaffe's reach northward. The burning wrecks in Narvik Fjord are both victory and warning. Because even as Britain destroys half of Germany's destroyer fleet in a single Arctic clash, the conflict is expanding beyond anything either side imagined, and in the months ahead, the balance between sea power, air power, and industrial capacity will determine which nation can endure the storm that is only just beginning to gather. The fjord is quiet again. Black water laps gently against twisted steel. Snow falls in thin sheets across half-submerged hulls. The echoes of gunfire are gone, replaced by wind moving through the mountains. What remains are wrecks, oil slicks, and the memory of a fleet that entered these waters with confidence and never sailed out again. In April 1940, the destruction of 8 German destroyers at Narvik represents one of the most concentrated surface losses the Kriegsmarine will suffer in a single campaign. Nearly half of Germany's operational destroyer strength vanishes in a matter of days. For a navy already smaller than its British counterpart, the blow is severe, but war rarely delivers simple victories. Despite the naval disaster, Germany retains control of Norway after Allied forces withdraw in June 1940. The British tactical triumph in Narvik does not prevent strategic consolidation by Berlin. Norwegian ports, airfields, and long Atlantic coastlines fall under German occupation. From these bases, U-boats will later strike deep into Allied shipping lanes. The Royal Navy has won the fjord. Germany has gained a coastline. So what did Narvik truly change? First, it exposed the vulnerability of German surface forces operating far from secure supply. The Type 1934 and 1936 destroyers were powerful on paper, armed with 5-inch guns and torpedoes capable of threatening larger ships. But they had limited range and consumed fuel rapidly, especially in rough northern seas. Tanker coordination failed. Refueling under Arctic conditions proved unreliable. Once inside Narvik Fjord, their operational endurance collapsed. Second, Narvik reinforced the dominance of heavy naval gunfire in confined waters. HMS Warspite, veteran of Jutland, demonstrated that battleship artillery still had devastating relevance. Her 15-inch guns did not merely damage destroyers. They broke morale, shattered hulls, and dictated movement within the fjord. Even near misses inflicted crippling shock damage. And there was another dimension: air-powered. Warspites launched aircraft locating and contributing to the destruction of U-64 signaled the growing integration of sea and air warfare. Though modest compared to later carrier battles in the Pacific, it hinted at a future where ships without air cover would be dangerously exposed. For Germany, the lessons were sobering. The loss of destroyers reduced escort capacity for larger capital ships such as Scharnhorst and Gneisenau. It constrained surface raiding operations in the Atlantic. Over time, the Kriegsmarine would lean more heavily on submarines as its primary offensive weapon. For Britain, Narvik was both reassurance and warning. The Royal Navy could strike hard. Coordination between destroyers and battleships remained effective. Yet the campaign also revealed how rapidly strategic focus could shift. Even as British sailors celebrated victory in Arctic waters, events in Western Europe forced a retreat from Norway to defend the homeland. In many ways, Narvik symbolizes the complexity of modern war: tactically decisive, strategically temporary. Standing on the cliffs above the fjord months later, one would see rusting hulls still visible beneath the surface. Divers decades after the war would confirm what history recorded: destroyers lying broken where they were scuttled. metal twisted by blast pressure. Silent testimony to a fight compressed into narrow channels between mountains. The human cost lingers as well. Hundreds of sailors from both sides died in freezing water or aboard burning ships. Captain Bernard Warburton Lee of the Royal Navy was posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross for his leadership during the First Battle. German crews who ran their ships aground often joined land fighting under General Eduard Dietl. Enduring harsh mountain conditions with limited supplies, courage existed on both decks. Fear too. Imagine the sensation inside a destroyer struck by a 15-inch shell. The deafening impact. The violent lurch of steel. Steam lines rupturing. Compartments flooding in seconds. Orders shouted over alarms. The decision to abandon ship into near-freezing water. Now imagine standing on a British destroyer, watching the plume of a shell rise near your bow, knowing a single hit could end everything. The fjord leaves no room for evasive maneuver. There is only forward or back. Fire or be fired upon. Narvik is often overshadowed by larger campaigns that followed. Dunkirk. The Battle of Britain. The Atlantic convoys. Yet in April 1940, it is one of the clearest examples of concentrated naval destruction in European waters. It also foreshadows the industrial dimension of the war. Britain, with global shipbuilding capacity and access to empire resources, can replace lost destroyers more rapidly than Germany. The Rhine, constrained by limited dockyard capacity and competing demands from the Army and Air Force, cannot easily recover from sudden fleet losses. Industrial depth becomes as decisive as tactical skill today. Standing beside modern naval vessels equipped with radar, guided missiles, and satellite communications, it is difficult to imagine warships dueling at visual range in narrow Arctic fjords. Yet the principles remain familiar. Logistics determine reach. Geography shapes tactics. Surprise can win a battle, but sustainment wins a campaign. Narvik reminds us that innovation is not always about new technology. Sometimes it is about coordination. Timing. The willingness to commit overwhelming force at a critical moment. In April 1940, Britain concentrated naval power with precision and resolve. Germany, bold in ambition, underestimated the risks of operating beyond secure support. The result was 8 destroyers lost, hundreds of lives changed forever, and a fjord transformed into a graveyard of steel. And perhaps the most striking lesson is this: even overwhelming destruction does not end a war. The burning ships at Narvik did not stop the fall of France. They did not prevent years of brutal conflict that followed. But they did shape naval strategy. They influenced planning. They reminded commanders that the sea, though vast, can become a trap. When we look back at Narvik Fjord, we see more than wrecks beneath cold water. We see a moment when courage collided with calculation. When geography amplified gunfire. When a single week erased half of a nation's destroyer fleet. It invites a quiet reflection. How many battles in history seem decisive in the moment, yet ripple outward in unexpected ways? How often does victory carry both triumph and warning? The mountains of Narvik still stand. The water still flows through those narrow channels. Beneath the surface, the remains of 1940 rest in silence, and the lessons, if we choose to listen, are still there.